another random Wikipedia article. So basically, we're gonna just start this journey from a random Wikipedia article and go from there. Let's see wherever this journey takes us. Um, Along the road, I hope we learn a lot of new things, or at the very least, correct any of the misinformation we have learned over the years. So, either way, it will be insightful. And yes, I know that Wikipedia is not necessarily edited or written by professionals per se. Although I might disagree because a lot of the articles are well written, and one can argue about what it means to be professional. But it definitely kind of uh, it wears the idea of wisdom of crowd, because Wikipedia is actively I mean, the contributors of Wikipedia are the crowd, are the people. So I would like to think that, okay, out of all the articles written, or even in any given article, maybe 80% of the information would be correct, so more than 50% at the very least. So that would be my base assumption. But again, these articles are written by people just like us, and uh, who could have the biases those editors or those authors have. So keeping that in mind, let's check out what's today's random Wikipedia article gonna be. By the way, I cannot help but notice the news part over here, which highlight the one of the greatest Indian playback singer, Lata Mangeshkar's demise. And uh, I mean, it's a it like Lata Mangeshkar is or was such a amazing singer. She uh, I mean, she used to, if I'm not mistaken, she started singing when she was like in her teens or something. So she have captured the spirit of India pre-independence, during independence, and post-independence with a lot of her music or songs, and it's really a trip in a memory lane whenever I listen to her songs. So um, yeah, I yeah, it would be impossible to kind of fill the gap which someone like her leaves when they die. And I believe their contribution sort of inspired so many other people to walk on the same path, encourage them to do the same thing which they did, and that created more beauty in the world, more legacy in the world. So, to a certain degree, that's her biggest contribution, in the music or in the world. And likewise, people who influence different more people to kind of live their true self, end up creating bigger impact and ripple effects in the world. And all right, so coming back to the random article of the day, I think it's not random article of the day. It's just a random article of a click, because if I click the random article again, it's gonna bring in some other page. Anyhow, today's topic is Kurumkan. So Kurumkan is a rural locality and the administrative center of the Kurumkansky district of the Republic of Buryatia, Russia, located 413 kilometers from Ulan-Ude, and they have population of 5,465 people back in 2010, and more or less in plus or minus 1,000 people over past 30 years. So the biggest city, the closest biggest city is Ulan-Ude, which is a capital city of the Republic of Buryatia, Bur- Buryatia, which is located in Russia, about 100 kilometers southeast of Lake Baikal on the Uda River at its confluence with the Selenga. So, and they have over 4,000 people living there. So, wow, such a huge difference. 400,000 people and 5,000 people. It's uh, Russia is a huge country. I mean, area-wise, it's the largest country on the planet. So, it makes sense that the density of the population density is super scarce, you know, compared to the countries closer to the equator, which tend to have more population. Um, isn't that kind of fascinating to a certain degree? Like, you know, all the nations which are away from the Tropic of Cancer and Tropic of Capricorn lines probably have, like, if you know, fewer people, obviously because it's colder and the resources are scarce and whatnot. So that makes sense, and people tend to come closer to the equator, and therefore biggest civilizations happened around equator, which itself is a imaginary line. But I guess the equator and the area between Tropic of Cancer and Tropic of Capricorn is sort of like a Goldilocks area for the life to thrive. Even though life exists on the poles, obviously, sort of, which kind of make me wonder if we uh, if we can see some similar pattern when it comes down to life in, say, solar system and the galaxy. Like, we do have Goldilocks zone, you know, which is India. Did I say India? I mean Earth. I think it's called Goldilocks zone, and Earth is habitable because it's far enough from the sun that uh, it doesn't have extreme hot temperature, and it's um, also not so far that, you know, there is nothing but just ice. But I'm sure that there could be um, there's a good chances that there's life even in our solar system. I mean, the chances are very, very low, but then I did say good chances. But what I mean is, like, we don't know the entire picture of our solar system. So who knows? Maybe in, like, one of the moons of Jupiter or one of those bigger planets, they might have like microbial life, because we know for sure that they have water. So it's a good chance that they may have like a very microorgasmic life. And uh, and until we get to a place where we can, you know, scan the entire planet ecosystem without actually stepping foot on that, uh, only then we'll be able to kind of figure out, you know, which planet can definitely not hold life. And I bet like the planets which are closer to the sun, definitely Mercury and Venus, they are so hot. They are super hot to sustain life. So unless there are some sort of like a lava beings, which would be kind of unusual thought, right? Like lava beings, like the metals in the under the ground of the planet. If those metals sort of like behave like like independent cells, so to speak. I don't think it's possible, because metal, obviously life would imply that organic life, and in our as far as our understanding goes, uh, we can't just have a life made of only um, one chemical compound. It definitely need like combinations of different chemical compounds, even though, like, for example, we are overwhelmingly based out of carbon, but we also have other minerals in our body, like calcium, which pretty much creates the entire bone structure. And likewise, there are a lot of other chemicals, compounds, and combinations of different chemicals kind of create the organic being we are, even though we are at the base of it are made of carbon. And who knows if there are like a different properties emerge. Um, who knows, like different solar system might have like a different uh, properties in, and instead of carbon, instead of life favoring carbon, maybe life could favor like some other metal or chemical. Could be, who knows, silicon, for example, right? Or any other metal, and that metal could form a basis of what DNA equivalent in that being. And uh, you know, and they kind of sort of evolve like a lava being. And it's a stupid thought. I know. I'm too high to kind of focus on that particular thought. And we are back in this random Wikipedia article. I'm kind of curious about Russia as a country. I mean, Russia obviously has is one of the superpower in the current era, and for some reason I can't. So like that. Okay. Yeah. So Russia is a country spanning Eastern Europe and the Northern Asia. It is the largest country in the world, covering over 17,125,191 square kilometers. Wow. And encompassing one eighth of Earth's inhabitable landmass. And can you imagine? Russia used to own Alaska, one of the states in the U.S., and Alaska is the biggest state in the U.S. So if Russia retained that state, Alaska state, if they hadn't sold to U.S., then uh, uh, this would have been like maybe even 1% or 2% bigger. But Russia extends across 11 time zones. Wow, 11. That must be super confusing. So 11 time zones between 2 to 12. Then like 30 minutes apart? Not sure. and borders 16 sovereign nations. That's pretty vast number of nations too, because that kind of um, increases the number of conflicts. Russia could be entering into. The most of any country in the world, of course, I hope. It is the ninth most populous country and the most populous country in Europe with a population of 145.5 million. Moscow, the capital, is the largest city entirely within Europe, with St. Petersburg is the country's second largest city and cultural center. Ninth most populous country. So India is obviously number two. China is number one at the moment, and I think based on the the color coding in the map, I feel that Brazil and US would be on like number five and six, somewhere there. Uh, St. Petersburg, formerly known as Petrograd and later Leningrad, is the second largest city in Russia. It is situated on the Neva River at the head of the Gulf of Finland on the Baltic Sea. All right, so the East Slavs emerged as a recognizable group in Europe between the 3rd and 8th centuries AD. The medieval state of Kievan Rus arose in the 9th century. In 1988, it adopted Orthodox Christianity from the Byzantine Empire. The Byzantine Empire, also referred to as the Eastern Roman Empire or Byzantium, was the continuation of the Roman Empire in its eastern provinces during late antiquity and the Middle Ages, when its capital city was Constantinople. Rus ultimately disintegrated among its principalities. The Grand Duchy of Moscow. The Grand Duchy of Moscow, Muscovite Rus, or Grand Principality of Moscow, was a Rus principality of the late Middle Ages centered on Moscow and the predecessor state of the Tsardom of Russia in the early modern period. It was ruled by the Rurik dynasty. Russia as a country went through so much changes. By the 18th century, the state had vastly expanded through conquest, annexation, and exploration to evolve into the Russian Empire, the third largest empire in history. Seriously? Third? Following the Russian Revolution, the Russian SFSR, which is Soviet Federation Socialist Republic, became the largest and leading constituent of the Soviet Union. The world's first constitution damn it, constitutionally socialist state. The Soviet Union played a decisive role in the Allied victory in World War II and emerged as a superpower and rival to the United States during the Cold War. The Soviet era saw some of the most significant technological advancement of the 20th century, including the world's first human-made satellite and launching of the first human in space. Following the dissolution of the Soviet Union in 91, the newly independent Russian SFSR renamed itself the Russian Federation. In the aftermath of the constitutional crisis of 93, a new constitution was adopted, and Russia has since been governed as a federal semi presidential republic. Vladimir Putin has dominated Russian political system since 2000. During the period, Russia has experienced democratic backsliding and has shifted to an authoritarian state. So, federal semi-presidential. A federation is a political entity characterized by a union of partially self-governing provinces, state, or other regions under a central federal government. Okay, in a federation, the self-governing status of the component states, as well as the division of power between them and the central. Okay, so the same federal concept as we have here. A semi-presidential system or dual executive system is a system of government in which a president exists alongside a prime minister and a cabinet, with the latter two responding to the legislature of the state. It differs from the parliamentary republic in that it has a popularly elected head of state. That's I would be kind of curious to kind of understand that system more, because Putin have been ruling Russia for like good enough time, like over 2 decades. Russia is a potential superpower. What? Did they downgraded them? A potential superpower is a state or a political and economic entity that is speculated to be or to have the potential to soon become a superpower. Okay, so does that mean US is considered superpower? So that's why every other country is like now like potential superpower? Maybe. It is ranked 52nd in the Human Development Index, which is still not bad. I'm not, obviously, 52nd is not the best, clearly. But out of 200 countries, if you stand 52nd, that's, I honestly, I don't buy this. I think there is, or maybe it's my perception. I've never been to Russia, so the hell I know. So I'm just absorbing what I observe online, right, on social media and other platforms. So we should check how Human Development Index is defined, or how they calculate that. Okay, with a universal healthcare system and a free university education, Russia's economy is the world's 11th largest by nominal GDP and the 6th largest by PPP. What is PPP? GDP, PPP means gross domestic product based on purchasing power parity. This article includes a list of countries by their forecast estimated GDP. PPP. Countries are sorted by PPP forecast estimates from Financial and Statistical Institute. Okay. It is recognized nuclear weapons state possessing the world's largest stockpile of nuclear weapons, with the second most powerful military and the fourth highest military expenditure. Russia's extensive mineral and energy resources are the world's largest, and it is among the leading producers of oil and natural gas globally. It is permanent member of the UN Security Council, a member of the G20 and the SCO, the Council of Europe, BRICS, the APEC, the OSCE, the IIB, and the WTO, as well as the leading member of the CIS, the CSTO, and the EAEU. Russia is also home to 30 UNESCO World Heritage Sites. Wow. Etymology. The name Russia is derived from Rus, a medieval state populated primarily by the East Slavs. Whereas a Rus, which is originally the name Rus, referred to the people, regions, and medieval states of the Kievan Rus. In Western culture, it was better known as Ruthenia from the 11th century onwards. Its territories are today distributed among Belarus, North Ukraine, Eastern Poland, and the European section of Russia. However, the proper name became more prominent in later history, and the country typically was called by its inhabitants Rusland. In order to distinguish the state from other states derived from it, it is denoted as Kievan Rus by modern historiography. The name Rus itself comes from the early medieval Rus people, a group of Norse merchants and warriors who relocated from across the Baltic Sea and founded a state centered on Novgorod. That later became Kievan Rus. Veliki Novgorod, also known as just Novgorod, is the largest city and administrative center of Novgorod Oblast, Russia. It is one of the oldest cities in Russia, being first mentioned in the 9th century. The city lies along the Volkhov River just downstream from its outflow from Lake something. A medieval Latin version of the name Rus was Ruthenia, which was used as one of several designations for East Slavic and Eastern Orthodox regions, and commonly as a designation for the lands of Rus. The current name of the country, Rosia, come from Byzantine Greek destination of Rus, spelled Rosia, pronounced Rosia in modern Greek. The standard way to refer to the citizens of Russia is Russians in English. There are two words in Russian which are commonly translated into English as Russians. One is Ruski, which most often refer to ethnic Russians, and the other is Rosian, which refers to citizens of Russia, regardless of ethnicity. The two words in Russian which are commonly translated into English as Russians, one is Ruski, which most often refers to ethnic Russians, and the other is Rosian, which refers to yeah. In India, I remember we used to, Russia is called as Rus. So I think this is not Rus. This probably is pronounced as Rus, maybe. So it makes sense. Rosia. Let's see the early history of this great nation. The first human settlement on Russia date back to Aldovan period in the early Lower Paleolithic. And the Aldovan was a widespread stone tool archaeological industry in prehistory. These early tools were simple, usually made with one or a few flakes chipped off from another stone. Aldovan tools were used during the Lower Paleolithic period, 2.6 million years ago, up until at least 1.7 million years back. The Lower Paleolithic is the earliest subdivision of the Paleolithic or Old Stone Age. It spans the time from around 3 million years ago, when the first evidence for stone tool production and use by hominin appears in the current archaeological record, until around 300,000 years ago. Okay. About 2 million years ago, representative of Homo erectus migrated to the Taman Peninsula in southern Russia. Taman or Taman. The Taman Peninsula is a peninsula in the present-day Krasnodar Krai, Krasnodar Krai of Russia, which borders the Sea of Azov to the north, the Strait of Kerch to the west, and the Black Sea to the south. Okay. Maybe this picture is not the correct representation of how big I would picture that landmass to be, but flint tools, whereas flint is a sedimentary cryptocrystalline form of the mineral quartz, categorized as the variety of chert that occurs in chalk or marly limestone. Flint was widely used historically to make stone tools and start fires. So flint tools, some 1.5 million years old, have been discovered in the North Caucasus, uh, which kind of means, I think that's how Caucasian kind of come into picture, I guess. So North Caucasus, radiocarbon dated specimens from Denisova cave in the Altai Mountains estimate the oldest Denisovan specimen lived 195 to 122,700 years ago. Fossils of Denny, Denny is a fossil from a girl who was at least 13 years old and lived some 90,000 years ago, shown to be an archaic human hybrid that was half Neanderthal and half Denisovan. Denny was found in 2012, and she represents the first time an ancient individual was discovered whose parents were probably from different species or something. So not Homo sapiens, but Homo Neanderthal and Homo Denisovan. Ooh, ooh, ooh. What happened to you, Sprinkles? Do you wanna interrupt, and do you wanna let's see if you do you wanna express your thoughts about anything? You wanna say anything? Okay. All right. That's fair. Yeah, I know you've been alone for a while. I left her alone very first time in the living room. So, do you wanna go to bed? Do you wanna sleep right now? What do you wanna do? Just hang around? Are you hungry? Okay, that means yes, I guess. Or maybe no, because, she's just sitting over here. She don't want to talk to you guys. She's mad at you guys. All right, so where were we? The first human settlement. So we were talking about Danny, for 13-year-old female or girl. So Russia was home to some of the last surviving Neanderthals from about 45,000 years ago, found in Mesmiskia cave. The first trace of an early modern human in Russia dates back to 45,000 years in western Siberia. The discovery of high concentration cultural remains of anatomically modern humans from at least 40,000 years ago was found at Kostyonsky and Boshyovo and at Sungir, dating back to 34,600 years ago, both respectively in western Russia. Humans reached Arctic Russia at least 40,000 years ago in Mamontovaya-Kuria. Nomadic pastoralism developed in the Pontic Caspian steppe, beginning in the Chalcolithic. Remnants of these steppe civilizations were discovered in places such as Ipatovo, Sintashta, Archaim, and Pazyerk, which bear the earliest known traces of horses in warfare. In classical antiquity, the Pontic-Caspian steppe was known as Scythia. In late 8th century BCE, ancient Greek traders brought classical civilization to the trade emporium in Tanas and Phanagoria. In the 3rd to 4th centuries AD, the Gothic kingdom of Oim existed in southern Russia, which was later overrun by Huns. Between the 3rd and 6th century AD, the Bosporan kingdom, which was Hellenistic polity that succeeded the Greek colonies, was also overwhelmed by the nomadic inventions invasions led by warlike tribes such as the Huns and Eurasian Avars. The Khazars, who were of Turkic origin, ruled the lower Volga basin steppes between the Caspian and Black Seas until the 10th century. Yeah, it's like 1,000 years back. I'm kind of curious about the imperial Russia. Let's jump right into the imperialism. So under Peter the Great, who was Peter the Great, Peter I, or Pyotr Alexeyevich, ruled the Tsardom of Russia and later the Russian Empire from 7th May 1682 until his death in 1725, jointly ruling between 1696 with his elder half-brother, Ivan. So how old was he when he died? Not too much, right? 25 and 15, so 43 years old. Okay. So under Peter the Great, Russia was proclaimed an empire in 1721 and became one of the European great powers, ruling from 1682 to 1725. Peter defeated Sweden in Great Northern War, securing Russia's access to the sea and sea trade. In 1703, on Baltic Sea, Peter founded St. Petersburg as Russia's new capital. Throughout his rule, sweeping reforms were made, which brought significant Western European cultural influences to Russia. The reign of Peter I's daughter Elizabeth in 1741 to 62 saw Russia's participation in the 7 Years' War, which actually lasted exactly 7 years. Wow, that's unique for the naming convention. During the conflict, Russian troops overran East Prussia and even reached the gates of Berlin. However, upon Elizabeth's death, all these conquests were returned to the Kingdom of Prussia by pro-Prussian Peter III of Russia. Okay. When was the Russian Age of Enlightenment? All right, Catherine II the Great, who ruled in 1762 to 96, presided over the Russian Age of Enlightenment. She extended Russian political control over the Polish Lithuanian Commonwealth and incorporated most of its territories into Russia, making it the most populous country in Europe. In the south, after the successful Russo-Turkish wars against the Ottoman Empire, Catherine advanced Russia's boundary to the Black Sea by dissolving the Crimean Khanate and annexing Crimea. Oh, okay. Crimean Khanate and annexing Crimea, Because I did hear about annexing Crimea a lot, so kind of curious about what that is. So the territory of Crimea, previously controlled by the Crimean Khanate or Khante, was annexed by the Russian Empire on 19th April 1783. The period before the annexation was marked by Russian interference in Crimean affairs, a series of revolts by Crimean uh, Tatars, and Ottoman ambivalence. Okay. As a result of victories over Qajar Iran through the Russo-Persian Wars, by the first half of the 19th century, Russia also made significant territorial gains in the Caucasus. Catherine's successor, her son Paul, was unstable and focused predominantly on domestic issues. Following his short reign, Catherine's strategy was continued with Alexander I from 1801 to 1825, wrestling for Finland from the weakened Sweden in 1809, and of Bessarabia from the Ottoman in 1812. In North America, the Russians became the first Europeans to reach and colonize Alaska. In 1803 to 1806, the first Russian circumnavigation was made. In 1820, a Russian expedition discovered the continent of Antarctica. Wow, in 1820. So, Alaska. The Russian America was the name for the Russian Empire's colonial positions in North America from 1799 to 1867. It consisted mostly of present-day Alaska in the U.S., but also included some outposts in California, including Fort Ross, and 3 forts in Hawaii, including Russian Fort. During the Napoleonic Wars, which were from 1803 to 1815, the Napoleonic Wars were a series of major global conflicts pitting the French Empire and its allies, led by Napoleon I, against a fluctuating array of European states formed into various coalitions. It produced a period of French domination over the most of continental Europe. So, during that timeline, during the Napoleon Wars, Russia joined alliances with various European powers and fought against France. The French invasion of Russia at the height of Napoleon's power in 1812 reached Moscow, but eventually failed miserably as the obstinate resistance in combination with a bitterly cold Russian winter. That's exactly what I was thinking. I mean, most of these people who fought wars and lived close to the equator and Tropic of Cancer and Capricorn never traveled to the outskirts of these imaginary Tropic of Cancer and Capricorn lines. So they never experienced the cold weather as some of the most northern and the southern hemisphere experience. All right, so what happened then? So this bitterly cold Russian winter led to disastrous defeat of invaders, in which pan-European Grand Army faced utter destruction, led by Mikhail Kutuzov and Barclay de Tolly. The Imperial Russian Army ousted Napoleon and drove throughout Europe in the War of the Sixth Coalition, ultimately entering Paris. Alexander I controlled Russia's delegation at the Congress of Vienna, which defined the map of the post-Napoleonic Europe. The officers who pursued Napoleon into Western Europe brought ideas of liberalism back to Russia and attempted to curtail the Tsar's power during the abortive Decembrist revolt of 1825. At the end of the conservative reign of Nicholas I, a zenith period of Russia's power and influence in Europe was disrupted by defeat in the Crimean War. Nicholas's successor, Alexander II, enacted significant changes throughout the country, including the Emancipation Reform of 1861. The Emancipation Reform of 1861 in Russia, also known as Edict of Emancipation of Russia, was the first and most important of the liberal reforms enacted during the reign of Emperor Alexander II of Russia. The reform effectively abolished serfdom throughout the Russia. Okay, so these reforms spurred industrialization and modernization. The Imperial Russian Army, which liberated much of the Balkans from Ottoman rule in the aftermath of the 1872-78 Russo-Turkish War. During most of the 19th and early 20th century, Russia and Britain colluded over uh, Afghanistan and its neighboring territories in Central and South Asia. The rivalry between the two major European empires came to be known as Great Game. Great Game. The Great Game was a political and diplomatic confrontation that existed for most of the 19th century and beginning of the 20th century between the British Empire and the Russian Empire over Afghanistan and neighboring territories in Central and South Asia. All right, the late 19th century saw the rise of various socialist movements in Russia. Alexander II was assassinated in 1881 by revolutionary terrorists. The reign of his son Alexander III was less liberal but more peaceful. The last Russian emperor, Nicholas II, was unable to prevent the events of the Russian Revolution of 1905, triggered by the humiliating Russo-Japanese War and the demonstration incident known as Bloody Sunday. The uprising was put down, but the government was forced to concede major reforms. Russian Constitution of 1906, including granting the freedoms of speech and assembly, the legalization of political parties, and the creation of an elected legislative body, the State Duma. Good job, Russia. The Revolution of 1905, also known as the First Russian Revolution, was a wave of mass political and social unrest that spread through vast areas of the Russian Empire, some of which was directed at the government. And what was humiliating about Russo-Japanese War? So the Russo-Japanese War was fought between the Empire of Japan and the Russian Empire during 1904 and 1905 over rival imperial ambitions in Manchuria and Korea. The major theaters of military operations were the Liaodong Peninsula and Mukden in southern Manchuria. Moving on to Revolution and Civil War. See, I'm almost always amazed by how superpowers, become superpower and how they sort of fall from their seat, I guess. So, it kind of it makes me be real and understand that things on the ground can change anytime. Crazy things can happen anytime, and especially now when the whole cultural war seems to be at the peak, or at least still ascending towards there. The division between different ideology gonna last for a real long time. So I'm not sure where this division gonna take us, meaning the people in the United States specifically, but also in other parts of the world. Because in every country is going through their own metamorphoses and changes. But here in the United States, the division is so deep, or at least it feels so deep on social media, that it's gonna take a long time to heal from that. And on top of that, people are not even trying to heal. They just want to pile on each other to cancel each other and discourage the expression of ideas, which is what bumped me more, because one of the main and the biggest reason why I choose to live in the United States is because of freedom of speech, especially doing what I do, which is stand-up comedy and this random shit. uh, I I want to make sure that when I express my controversial views on anything, I can still uh, you know feel that my rights are preserved. So that's why I love US, and hopefully with all the craziness going on right now, all the craziness with respect to Joe Rogan, for example, is bumming, because Joe Rogan has created this unique um, style of podcast, I guess, or broadcast, if we go back to the legacy word, where people can have a conversation, and more often nuanced conversation around very difficult topics. And he does relatively good job bringing in people from all areas of life, even though I feel that he his uh, or I feel that he tend to bring in people who make more noise, and try to bring in people from the opposite side of the spectrum, so that he can understand where they are coming from, which is all noble. Uh, but he in evidently help out grifters like, I don't know, Dave Rubin or Candace Owen or Stephen Crowder or Ben Shapiro and others, to kind of give them a platform and a voice. And again, it's his choice, his show. Everyone have option to either watch it or not. I mean, I used to watch almost all of his content, that maybe like 4 or 5 years back, um, and because he used to do it like less frequently too, like maybe 2 or 3 podcasts a week. So it was something I could like listen to actively. But now he does it like so very often that it's hard to kind of listen to all the podcasts. So I end up picking which podcast makes sense to kind of experience through. And more than often I feel that the grifters he bring on the show, are doesn't have good enough strategy or point to kind of to kind of uh, earn my attention, if I may. Uh, but that being said, I don't like I don't even know like what other what people Joe Biden, did I say Joe Biden? So silly of me. What other people Joe Rogan talks with, from the left side of political spectrum. I know he did had few of those progressive personalities, and those conversations were helpful. And there were flaws in those conversations. When I say flaws, I mean like I shouldn't say flaws because that means something else. But there were definitely a lot of points which I personally disagree with, even in those conversations. But when I listen to Joe Rogan having a conversation with more like a right leaning personality, uh, there are a lot of things I personally disagree with, and the core of the issue is Rogan giving platform to all of these people, right? So, and I think he has all the rights to do that. And like everyone, any being have right not to listen to his podcast or any other podcast which you feel doesn't align with with uh, with your echo chamber, I guess, or if it feels you triggered, if it makes you triggered, so to speak, in um, or whatever, like everyone have freedom to either consume the media they want to or just express the media they want as they want to. So that's where I think um, it's important to sort of stand up with people, stand up with Joe Rogan specifically right now, because he has independently created this form of podcasting, and just listening to more nuanced conversation make me absorb the information better, because I'm not just absorbing that information in a bite forms, but instead like understanding it from different angles, and also understanding the stories behind how those, say, innovations or art or creativity sort of like came to be. So that's why I love long form conversation, and um, hopefully we'll pass through this uncertainty where a lot of people are trying to cancel out other media personalities for their personal opinion, and when we get to the other side, maybe like, I don't know, in the next 5-10 years or something, uh, we'll have another set of issues. So the cycle of issues will never end. Uh, but hopefully the issues at the time would be less catastrophic than the issues of our time, especially the whole climate crisis thing. That's a whole different ball game, and to a certain degree, I feel that most of us are not even prepared for what is about to come in next few decades. So, we're gonna have a very rocky ride. But speaking of rocky rides, Russia had its own fair of rocky rides too, with all of its revolution and civil war. Like in 1914, Russia entered World War One in response to Austria-Hungary's declaration of war on Russia's ally Serbia, and fought across multiple fronts while isolated from its Triple Entente. The Triple Entente describes the informal understanding between the Russian Empire, the French Third Republic, and the United Kingdom of Great Britain and Ireland. It was built upon the Franco-Russian alliance of 1894, the Entente Code Deal of 1904 between Paris and London. All right. In 1916, the Brusilov offensive of the Imperial Russian Army almost completely destroyed the Austro-Hungarian army. However, the already existing public distrust of the regime was deepened by the rising cost of war. So, wait, the already existing public distrust of the regime was deepened by the rising cost of war, which makes sense. High casualties, casualties, high casualties and rumors of corruption and treason. All this formed the climate for the Russian Revolution of 1917, carried out in two major acts. In early 1917, Nicholas II was forced to abdicate. He and his family were imprisoned and later executed in Yekaterinburg during the Russian Civil War. The monarchy was replaced by a shaky coalition of political parties that declared itself the provisional government. The provisional government proclaimed the Russian Republic in September. On 6 January 1918, the Russian Constituent Assembly declared Russia a democratic federal republic, thus ratifying the provisional government's decision. The next day, the Constituent Assembly was dissolved by the All Russian Central Executive Committee. An alternative socialist establishment coexisted. The Petrograd Soviet, wielding power through the democratically elected councils of workers and peasants, called Soviets. Soviets were political organizations and governmental bodies of the late Russian Empire, primarily associated with the Russian Revolution, which gave the name to the latter state of the Soviet Union. Soviet were the main form of government in the Russian SFSR. And the rule of the new authorities only aggravated the crisis in the country instead of resolving it. And eventually, the October Revolution, led by Bolshevik leader Vladimir Lenin, overthrew the provisional government and gave full governing power to the Soviets, leading to the creation of the world's first socialist state. The Russian Civil War broke out between the anti-communist White movement and the new Soviet regime with its Red Army. In the aftermath of signing the Treaty of Brest-Litovsk, that concluded hostilities with the Central Powers of World War I, Bolsheviks Russia surrendered most of its western territories, which hosted 34% of its population, 54% of its industries, 32% of its agricultural land, and roughly 90% of its gold mines. Wait, what? So the Russian Civil War broke out between the anti-communist White movement and the new Soviet regime with its Red Army. In the aftermath of signing the Treaty of Brest-Litovsk, that concluded hostilities with the Central Power of World War I, Bolshevik Russia surrendered most of its western territories. Okay. The Allied powers launched an unsuccessful military intervention in support of anti-communist forces. In the meantime, both the Bolshevik and White movement carried out campaigns of deportations and executions against each other, known respectively as the Red Terror and White Terror. By the end of the violent civil war, Russia's economy and infrastructure were heavily damaged, and as many as 10 million perished during the war, mostly civilians. Millions became white immigrants, and the Russian famine of 1921-22 claimed up to 5 million victims. Soviet Union. On 30th December 1922, Lenin and his aides formed the Soviet Union by joining the Russian SFSR into a single state with the Belarusian, Transcaucasian, and Ukrainian republics. Eventually, internal border changes and annexations during World War II created a union of 15 republics, the largest in size and population being the Russian SFSR, which dominated the Union for its entire history politically, culturally, and economically. Following Lenin's death in 1924, a troika During its 69-year history, the Soviet Union usually had a de facto leader who would not necessarily be head of state but would lead while holding an office such as Premier or General Secretary. Under the 1977 Constitution, the chairman of the Council of Ministers, or whatever that is, Troika, was designated to take charge. Okay. Eventually, Joseph Stalin, the General Secretary of the Communist Party, managed to suppress all opposition factions and consolidated power in his hands to become the country's dictator by the 1930s. Leon Trotsky, the main proponent of world revolution, was exiled from the Soviet Union in 1929, and Stalin's idea of socialism in one country became the official line. The, the continued internal struggle in the Bolshevik Party culminated in the Great Purge. The Great Purge, or the Great Terror, also known as the Year of 37, and the Yezhovich China, was Soviet General Secretary Joseph Stalin's campaign to solidify his power over the party and nation. The purge were also designed to remove the remaining influence of Leon Trotsky, as well as the others. So Lev Davidovich Bronstein, better known as Leon Trotsky, was a Ukrainian Russian Marxist revolutionary political theorist and politician. Ideologically a communist, he developed a variant of Marxism, which has become known as Trotskyism. Okay. Under Stalin's leadership, the government launched a command economy. A planned economy is a type of economic system where investments, production, and the allocation of capital goods takes place according to economy-wide economic plans and production plans. A planned economy may use centralized, decentralized, participatory, or Soviet-type forms of economy. All right. He also worked on industrialization of largely rural countries and collectivization of its agriculture. During this period of rapid economic and social change, millions of people were sent to penal labor camps, including many political convicts for their suspected or real opposition to Stalin's rule, and millions were deported and exiled to remote areas of the Soviet Union. The transitional disorganization of the country's agriculture, combined with the harsh state policies and a drought, led to the Soviet famine of 1932 to 33, which killed up to 8.7 million. The Soviet Union ultimately made the costly transformation from a largely agrarian economy to a major industrial powerhouse within a short span of time. Wow. There is a lot of blood on most of the Russian leaders' hand, and that's true for a lot of leaders, I guess, across the world. But clearly, Russia and even China, and I bet most of the dictators, they literally don't care of other people's lives. That's why they are dictator. And one could even argue what drives people to such what drives people to do anything to attain the power. Yeah, it's a complicated topic, obviously, because not everyone is driven by power. Some are driven by greed, some are driven by lust, some are driven by whatever they are driven by. So there are different uh, feelings or different goals or different attitudes and mindset which drive different people. And on the positive side too, there are people who are driven by service. There are people who are driven by um, bringing innovation in into the world. uh, there are people who are driven by just making other people laugh. There are people who are driven by um, passing on the knowledge to to the other people, sharing the knowledge, information, whatever they have. So everyone have different uh, forces, so to speak, which drive what they do. And I can only imagine, like, when when people start abusing the, the the forces they have in place, like abusing their power, abusing their greed, abusing their um, 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 even abusing their service, I guess. I'm not sure. I'm too sleepy for for um, any profound insight or thought there. But I'm just glad and grateful that I'm able to do this. And my plan is to continue to do this, obviously, and I'll and continue to see what random um article or how random thought can take us to a very interesting and um, learning experience altogether. I guess I'm too sleepy, but you guys